So this review was initially supposed to be between Masami and Taylor, but schedules and all that stuff as things were weird. So we're recording this separately. So the movie we're talking about today is called Wild Mountain Thyme. That stars Emily Blunt and Jamie Dornan from 50 Shades of Grey fame. And yeah, it's a romance movie, and yes, it's not the holidays, I'm not watching a rom-com, but the reason why I had an interest in seeing this movie was because there was a review out there, a spoiler review, so I already knew what I was getting into with this movie, with the title, Are the Straights Okay? And from that review, I knew I had to watch this movie. What I noticed when I first started watching the movie, the colors were like a little too saturated. Not all colors, but red and green were like super saturated. Like the red was like Shyamalan level of red, and like blood red, it symbolizes the mother's dress, like that kind of like blood red for no reason. And then the green, because it's like the lands, the lands and fields of Ireland, you know. And I guess they wanted to show it really green, but it wasn't like realistic green, not like Hobbiton green where there's like variations of green. It was like the color of my hair. Like, yeah, it was some bright ass fucking green. I initially thought it was the copy that I rented was like weird or something, but I paused it, went back and looked at the trailer, and noticed, no, the reds and greens in the trailer were also like that. So, I don't know what the movie was trying to do with symbolism with that, with the colors, or they just need to fire their colorist, because that I was just already like not having. You know, the movie starts off, they show them like when they were kids, like really quickly. You see the boy like dipping his nose into a flower, you know, like a bee does, like something weird. And then like the girl, who's Emily Blunt, you know, little, you know, them as children, just like is like sitting on a tree and just like admiring the boy being weird and sniffing at a flower, like you do. Like, okay, fine. So then boom, goes to them as adults, and Christopher Walken, who plays Mr. 50 Shades, and I'm just going to refer to him as Mr. 50 Shades, and I'm going to refer to Emily Blunt's character as Emily Blunt, because it really doesn't matter their character names, because who cares. So, Christopher Walken is Mr. 50 Shades' dad, and so, you know, he's like, you know, I'm getting old, I'm gonna die soon kind of shit, you know, like old people do. And he's like, hey, I'm gonna have to leave this farm to someone. And Mr. 50 Shades is thinking, well, I'm your only son currently right now in this home. You're going to leave it to me. And he's like, no. And he's like, there's something not right about you. And telling him, like, because their last name...
Dad?
Yeah, from his dad.
Jesus.
And their last name is Riley, because that's very Irish. And he's like, you're not a Riley, you're a Kelly. There's something wrong with Kellys. There's always something wrong. But they never say what. You know, it's like, do you eat food off a trash can lid? Like, you know, like what's wrong with the Kelly side of the family? There's crazy in the family. And then the son is like, no, I'm a Riley, you know, and then they just kind of move on from there. The important detail, so while they're discussing this, it's also pouring rain out. It's pouring rain out. And when we first meet Emily Blunt, she's smoking outside. And there's like a huge thing in this movie about how they're super anti-smoking. Like, it's one thing to have like a character be like, you know, I really wish you would just stop smoking. But it was just like, oh, you know, she's smoking outside because she really hates it that like, oh, she's smoking because she doesn't smoke around me, and because she's not around me, that means she's smoking. Like, it's like, what the fuck? And she's also not like smoking a cigarette. She's like smoking like an old sailor like pipe too. You know, like a corn cob, like it's weird.
Question: does this take place like
now? That's why I got confused at first, because you know they're in like because I didn't see like a cell phone or something, and I thought maybe this is back in the day. But then like, you know, you start seeing like modern shit, and you're like, okay, no, it's just their country, but not American country, but their Irish country. She does have cigarettes, but like I guess her main thing is to smoke out of this pipe. I mean, whatever, right? So the next day, Mr. 50 Shades is like on this boat, you know, in this lake river thing for reasons, and you see Emily Blunt like watching him, and he starts yelling at no one and swatting like the boat oar at nothing. And the funny thing is, like, the boat doesn't look like a little like rowboat. It looks like like an enlarged turtle shell flipped over. Like, you know when you go to the Museum of Natural History and they show you like, this is what, like, you know, a prehistoric turtle was, and it's like the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, you know? But that looked like the boat he was in. It was like the circular, like, black turtle shell that he had like a rowing oar, and then he was yelling at no one, and he was like swatting at like a fly or something, you know, being a weird dude. And then, like, Emily Blunt calls his attention, and then he's just like, what? And he, like, falls off the boat into the water, and then he, like, comes out of the water. But you would expect, like, a rom-com scene, you know, where, like, the guy comes out of the water, he's all wet. But, like, that kind of, like, I guess, hot, sexy thing doesn't happen. He just comes out, and he's just kind of, like, awkward, and just drags his turtle shell behind him while they're walking, like, down a field. Like, it was just like, did this scene add anything? Like, I don't understand what's going on. Okay, so then 30 minutes in, Mr. 50 Shades is like, I'm gonna marry the girl being Emily Blunt. He's like, I'm gonna marry her. And you saw in the trailer, because, like, they've known each other since they were children, but he was just like, I'm determined, I'm gonna marry her. And remember in the trailer where he's, like, practicing, like, his like, proposal, but he's, like, you know, saying it to, like, a donkey or something? Well, like, the town old man, or the farmland old man, sees him do that, and because he's always been, like, the weird guy, he, like, spreads a rumor around to everyone that, like, he had proposed to a donkey, you know? So, like, in the movie, there's a reoccurring joke whenever someone, like, whenever they refer to Mr. 50 Shades, they're like, oh, yeah, I heard he's married to a donkey now. And he's just like, God, he's just like, I'm angry. Why does everyone keep misunderstanding my weirdness? Like, okay, bro. So then they determined at 30 minutes, after the whole, like, I'm gonna marry her, like, thanks, that came out of nowhere, that Christopher Walken wants to sell his farm to his American nephew being John Hamm. Oh, then there's a music break where you can, where we just get to listen to Emily Blunt sing at a pub, like you do.
What does she sing? Why?
I don't know, some song. Bees? What?
Is it about bees?
Right.
Is she good?
Well, yeah, because she was in Into the Woods. She's done music before, yeah. Yeah, the singing is good, but there was just a music break in the movie. Like, cool, thanks. So then Mr. 50 Shades meets up with, like, a random lady at, like, a pub or something, and then they start kind of, like, chatting and all that stuff. They're, like, outside of the place. You know, she's like, the lady he's talking to is kind of like, yeah, she's a naughty lady. So she talks about how, like, she's smoking. She's talking about how, like, oh, I've had sex with two different priests. And he's like, oh, I can't believe you did that, you know? And then she's like, yeah, like, what's your secret? And then he goes and whispers in her ears. He says, I have a tininess in my brain. I have a tininess in my brain. She laughs so... Yes.
September?
Right. She laughs so hard, she falls off the ledge that she was sitting on. And then he goes, no, and then he, like, goes further into her ear and, like, whispers. We don't know what he says, but, I mean, we know the spoiler, so we know what he probably said to her.
I don't feel like I would care about any of these people.
Yeah, of course not.
Whether they lived or died.
No, for real. Yeah.
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 I have a tininess in my brain.
I have a tininess in my brain. Yeah.
Tininess being a noun now.
Yes.
A real noun.
Apparently so, yes.
That people use in Ireland.
Or maybe him. Or maybe just him.
Maybe just him.
Because he's a weird one, remember that.
Why is he trying to get married to the girl?
Because apparently he's like, I've always loved her ever since we were little. Because they live, their farms are next to each other. Like, I guess out of convenience. Well, you've lived next door to me. I guess you'll do. You know, like one of those things.
I'm glad I'm not from that small of a town. Jesus.
I know, right? Thank God we're it's because we're bi-coastal elites. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So then 40 minutes in, John Hamm shows up, which is great. I'm like, oh, good, finally something nice to look at.
Enter attractiveness.
Mr. 50 Shades, I'm sorry, since I really knew him first from 50 Shades, I was like, you are always going to be a creep to me, you know? Even when he did that show, The Fall, with Gillian Anderson, he was actually supposed to play a creep. He was actually, funny enough, he was perceived a little bit hotter in that show when he was purposely a creep, then he was supposed to be the hot Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. Like, I just like the funniest thing.
Bad.
Yeah, that's funny. When you're supposed to be the hot guy, you're a creep, but when you play the creep, I'm like, hey, he's kind of hot. Like,
Something went wrong.
yeah, he also is like, his acting is very cardboard. Like, I feel like if him and Channing Tatum were in the same room, you would just be like, there's mannequins here, you know? John Hamm shows up, and while they're at the airport, he's like, hey, I'm gonna rent a car. And do you know what fucking car he rents? To drive to the countryside of Ireland, of all things? A Rolls Royce.
Oh.
Like,
Do they have those there?
that's right.
Why? Like,
I mean, like, could you imagine he really wanted to get, like, you know, like, if he wanted to get, like, a fucking Honda Civic, but he saw the Rolls Royce, he's like, might as well. Might as well. I'm here. How often am I gonna be in Ireland, right? You know?
I'm sure this will be great for a wet island.
Yeah.
A wet,
He's
cold
driving
island.
it through, like, the mud and shit. Like, oh my god. I'm like, those cars are expensive. And then what security deposit are you gonna get back for that, you know?
Right.
Yeah, unless you're gonna hose it down, you know?
I just imagine him, for some reason, he's the only one that's shirtless in the entire movie. Spraying down this car.
Oh my god. I mean, if they had a scene where John Hamm was shirtless spraying down a car, I'd be like, you know what? I actually really enjoyed this movie. Like, I mean, like... They're like, what about it, John Hamm? Oh, you know he was only in the movie for, like, 10 minutes. I mean, like, I really enjoyed, like, just that one part, you know? Like...
He showed his diverse background and foreground.
So, because his American ass was there was so much dialogue, and I get really annoyed with it in movies. They do a lot of that American versus Irish thing. Like, John Hamm will, like, you know, express, like, an opinion, because, you know, he's gonna be the one who's gonna buy the farm after, you know, Uncle dies, and he's like, oh, how many acres is it? They're like, I don't know how many acres we have, we just got this much of land. And he asks Emily Blunt, how many acres, you know, do you have? And she's like, I don't know, I just got this thing. And then John Hamm is like, he's like, how do none of you guys know, like, how many acres you own? Like, and it became a thing of, like, instead of, like, oh, it's not, like, how much we have, it's blah, blah, blah. Like, instead of, like, having, like, a general, like, a good excuse, it became, like, oh, you Americans want, like, you know, persistent measurements on land you want to own, you know? Like...
Do they just not measure things, or is that... Because I would want to know, granted I am an American and I'm not Irish, well, what do I own? Where does my land start and end?
Right.
Where am I?
Right.
how do I know
City
what's
is
mine?
this?
Right.
What's today's date? Like those
Like,
things.
where does it
Right.
end?
Yeah, and I hate when movies do that, when they always do a thing of, like, oh, you American thing, and then they'll be like, oh, well, you're the non-American thing, and it's like, shut up, you're all wrong, you know? Like, you're all wrong. Anyway, so then cuts to the mother going into a hospital. Like, it just cuts to, like, whatever. Like, who cares about the stuff in between? You see her getting wheeled into an ambulance. At first I was like, what's going on? And then I realized, oh, that's the mom. And so, of course, Christopher Walken is devastated because that's the mother, and it was expected that he was going to die first, but then she just isn't in the movie anymore. And then Christopher Walken's, you know, he's on oxygen, so he's like, I'm dying, yeah, I'm old and stuff. And they're like, okay, you're old and stuff. 60 minutes, so an hour into this movie, because this movie is like more than it needed to be. It's like an hour and a half or something, but it felt longer than that. So 60 minutes into the movie, you really can tell how much they hate smoking in this movie. I'm not a fan of smoking either, but it's like, okay, truth PSA, calm down, you know? Emily Blunt plays like a vinyl, like plays like Swan Lake, as she's just like, you know, dancing around her house. But initially, I didn't realize that was Swan Lake. The first, like, few notes, I thought it was Flight of the Bumblebee. I thought the movie was going to be smart like that. I really thought it was Flight of the Bumblebee, because I thought I heard that. But then I realized, no, it's Swan Lake. I thought the movie was trying to do some foreshadowing with the music, you know? But no, it's Swan Lake. So she's like, ooh, Swan Lake, da-da-da. Then cut to, Emily Blunt is in New York with John Hamm.
Oh, does she know him?
What?
Well, like, he had like talked to her and like flirted with her, while he was there, but like. So, like, it was funny because John Hamm was flirting with Emily Blunt, but Emily Blunt was still kind of, like, eyeing Mr. 50 Shades, and Mr. 50 Shades was just being, like, really awkward. Like, not the cute awkward, but just the, awkward, you know? I think they really wanted him to play, like, hot awkward because he's Mr. 50 Shades, so he's, like, awkward, but it's okay, he's still attractive, but it's like, no, it was, you know? Anyway,
Okay.
so they're in New York, and she's like, oh, I'm only in New York for like a day. You know, she's like, I'm gonna fly back tomorrow. And he's like, what the fuck? She's like, yeah, I paid someone only 2 days to watch my farm. He's like, wait, so you take care of the farm yourself? You don't have anyone to do it? She's like, yeah, well, right now I have someone doing it for me. And like, John Hamm's like, really? You only came here for 1 day?
I mean, right? Like, it sounds nice, but like, where did the money come from? Like, does she like? She got it? Like, to just do it like that?
So like they hung out, went to go see a ballet, of course at Swan Lake. Then they had dinner, you know. She gets to like kiss John Hamm, which I'm like, I guess bless you for that, you know. And also John Hamm is played as like the bad guy in this movie, but he's not really the like maybe again I'm American and all that stuff, but he's more of like he's the logical voice in the movie, but he's played as like the bad guy for being a logical voice. You know?
Yeah, why would you? New York's not a cheap place to go.
Yeah.
Nor is flying over. Why would you do it for a day?
Girl, I felt the same way. Like, I went to London for a week, and it should have been 2 weeks, but I went for a week. It takes a whole day to fly, you know? Oh, I also wrote down what is wrong with everyone in this movie. Like, there's something wrong with everyone. Yeah, I literally just wrote down what is wrong with everyone in this movie. And then I wrote down, why does he have a metal detector? Because you see throughout, like, when John Hamm first arrived, up until this point in the movie, Mr. 50 Shades, just for some reason, has been walking around his freaking land with a metal detector. No one asks him why he has it. He just has it. Which I think, come on, if I, like, you see someone with a metal detector, you just go, the fuck you looking for, right? Or you're, like, looking for treasure. Even if I saw, like, the stereotypical thing of some dude on a beach with a metal detector, I'd be like, yo, what's that for? I'll still ask. So then the third act of the movie is cued by a rainstorm. So the movie starts off with a rainstorm and then ends with a rainstorm, you know? So John Hamm is flying back to Ireland to pretty much, I guess, like, finalize the paperwork for the farm and all that stuff. And Mr. 50 Shades is, like, talking to Emily Blunt, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna have to leave soon. I gotta pick him up from the airport, kind of stuff. And Emily Blunt is like, no, we need to talk before you do. We need to talk. Like, oh my god. She's been feeling depressed because she's quit smoking. And, like, I've never smoked, so I don't know. Like, I think depression, you know, I know people get really, like, irritable really easily that have quit smoking. So she's like, I'm depressed. She's feeling a certain way. And Mr. 50 Shades is kind of like, okay, I've got this metal detector, and I'm just here, kind of stuff. And, you know, she's pretty much professing her love to him. Like, I love you. I've always loved you since we were kids. Yeah, this comes out of nowhere, girl. This comes out of nowhere. I love you, always loved you. We should get married. And mind you, he wanted to get married to her in the beginning of the movie, but now he's just kind of like, I don't know. For like a good chunk after that, they're both arguing about like love and not love. Like they're dancing, like they're talking about that they love each other, but then they also don't really, like it's so... Like, it's so nonsensical. Like, for what felt like 5 to 10 minutes, I doubt it was, but it felt like it, they were just kind of like, no, but this is not how it's supposed to be, and then you're not in my, like, it's a lot of that, like, instead of saying, I love you, and no, I don't love you, it was like, no, us living next to each other our whole lives, and like that very like trying to do that Notebook kind of shit, you know, like I wrote you every day, but it was like inside like her kitchen, and it was just like going nowhere, like literally the conversation was going around in a circle. Then finally, I wrote it down, at an hour and 26 minutes, and I told you this movie's like an hour and 35 minutes, at an hour and 26 minutes, hour and 26, so we are 10 minutes before the end of the movie ending, he says, no, she's like, you know, I want to marry you, I want to marry you. He's like, no, you can't. Even though we saw in the beginning of the movie, he had a ring and he was gonna propose to her. He's like, no, we can't marry. She goes, what? Are you gay? Like, well, what's up? Da da da. And then he says, no, I believe I'm a honeybee. Are you okay? Like,
you have not. I'm guessing they weren't there because you would have told me about them, but there was nothing that really would have hinted at him thinking he's a honeybee or had that really affect the rest of the plot. Like there was nothing to hint about that besides the tininess in my brain.
Where was like the like? Is there? I have so many questions. And I'm almost like certain that there's probably no answers. I'm sure because where first of all where was the build up to this? Like was there? I mean does he do little bee things? I mean, do bees hunt for treasure in fields? Like, is that his form of pollinating? Like looking for metal? Like, what is it? Does he have feelers somewhere? Does he have like? Are we missing something? Is his vision way off? Did he have a terrible acid trip? LSD, DMT. Which one was it? Like, did he? Does he dress like a bee when he goes to bed or some shit? Like behind closed doors, does he hum to himself? Does he sniff flowers heavily? Like, do we? Is there a build up to this at all, or is it just smack? He thinks he's a bumblebee.
the tininess in the brain and the beginning of the movie where you see him as a little boy dipping his face into the a flower and then getting pollen on his nose. That was the only thing. He wasn't even wearing yellow and fucking black. You know what I mean? He you know what I mean? It wasn't I don't know, maybe I didn't notice it because I didn't care to notice it. Maybe in the background he collected bee photos or some shit. There wasn't anything like that. The movie, I don't know what the green and red were supposed to be, what kind of symbolism that's supposed to be. I spent way too much money in art school to learn about symbolism in art and media, and I do not know what the fuck they were trying to tell me with that shit. But yeah, in an hour and 26 minutes, he said, no, I can't marry you. And she's like, what? Is it because you gay? He's like, no, I'm not gay. It's because I believe I'm a honeybee. And she goes, are you fucking kidding me? And she goes, how long? He's like, no, I've always known this. And I feel like this is such a straight equivalent of how do you know you're gay or how do you know you're trans kind of thing. I just feel like it's a very hetero thing. I don't know, because I'm looking at my other notes, because I forgot I have a third page of notes. It says, he always thought he was a bee, and he says, that's why I hated your smoking, because bees hate smoke. I had to pause the movie to scream. Just letting you know.
I thought he was the only one who hated. I thought everyone hated the smoke, not just Mr. Honey.
Yeah, his mom hated the smoking. The Christopher Walken's dad was kind of not the biggest fan of it, but because the two of them died, he was the last one to be like, I'm not really a big fan of your smoking. And then she's like, okay, so she quit smoking. And because the reason he didn't like to smoke wasn't because, he cared about her health and tobacco shit, was because he's a honeybee.
Do we find out in the last 20 minutes why he thinks he's a bumblebee? Or is it just because he's a Kelly? Is this the reasoning we're left with?
But I feel like, Joe, you still haven't answered any of my questions.
I can't answer it because the movie doesn't fucking tell me, dude!
I don't... What else happens?
She literally says, whatever, so she's like, some days I think I'm a house cat. And he's like, what? And she's like, well, no, but I don't, and it's just like, what? Huh? Again, it feels like it's that thing where people are like, oh, if we let gays get married, then they'll want to marry a goat. And you got freaking straight people being like, I'm a fucking honeybee.
No, Joe, go on.
So then finally he's like, okay, he doesn't want to talk about it anymore, and he's like, I really have to go pick up John Hamm at the airport. And during that whole scene in the kitchen where it's like, I love, no love, the honeybee thing, it keeps cutting back and forth to John Hamm on the flight to Ireland, kind of flirty, kind of not, with like the lady sitting next to him. And then like, she's just kind of like, oh, you know, you're going to Ireland. Oh, you're American. What are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm buying a farm or some shit. And she's like, oh, okay. Blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, he's on a plane, so you're going to fall asleep. And then she goes, oh, you must be single. He's like, how do you know? She's like, 'cause you snore. And I'm like, maybe he tired. Like, bitch, like, the fuck? Emily Blunt gets into her car, which is like a Jeep Range Rover kind of thing. And she's in the car, like, having a moment with the guy, because he's like, okay, I'll drive you to the airport. And she's like, I can't believe you won't get married to me. Like, she's still on this. And he's like, I'm a honeybee. And it's like, It's just, she freaks out and just crashes her car into a tree. Just does, yeah. You know, like you do.
So they die?
No, because it's like one of those, like, harder shell cars, so it just, you know, the car's fucked, but they're fine, you know, like you do. Because the plot says so.
But why do you want to marry this guy still?
I'm thinking really because they settled for the convenience. For real. The reason why he had the metal detector was at the beginning of the movie when he was practicing, you know, his proposal to the girl, he had a ring like in his hand. It was like his mother's ring or whatever. But then he lost it and he was like looking for it the entire time in the field. But no one had asked him, why are you with the metal detector? And because he's so awkward, he's not going to say, don't mind me, I'm looking for a ring or something. Or have you guys seen a ring? Turns out Emily Blunt had found it, like, by the fence. And there was this whole debacle about, oh, they put up a fence that separates your land and my land and blah, blah, blah. And they just so happened to find it right at the fence line and all that shit. And so she had the ring all along in her pocket. She's like, oh, this is the ring. And he's like, yes, that's the ring I was going to propose to you with, but now I can't because I'm a honeybee. And she's like, no, I do want to marry you. I'm not lying. This is exactly what happened in the movie. I didn't write this movie. The movie at the end is something different from the beginning. And she says, she's like, she doesn't care that he thinks he's a honeybee. She just wants to marry him. That's what my notes are telling me. That's what my notes are telling me when I remember. Yeah. She's like, I don't care that you think you're a honeybee. I just want to marry you. And he's like, I guess. Yeah, so she says, I don't care that you think you're a bee. I just want to marry you. Because some reason, there's some desperation in this entire fucking movie for people. So then, you know, I told you it was torrential downpour the entire time. And I guess that's the reason why she crashed her car. But really, it's because because the plot said so, you know? So, then the two of them walk up to the top of a hill while the sky starts, like, clearing out. And then, it, like the sky's clearing out as if it's, like, them, like, proclaiming their love or some whatever bullshit they're trying to do. The sky, you know, she has the ring. And then, like, during that, and then that, again, intercuts with John Hamm just, like, waiting at the airport to be picked up. And then the lady that was flirting with him was like, oh, you've been stood up? And he was like, I guess so. And she's like, I guess you'll have to hang out with me now. And he's like, all right, I guess. Instead of being like, maybe I should call someone, he was just like, oh, I guess I'll just, yeah. And then while that happens, like I said, they walked up the hill, the John Hamm thing happens. Then it intercuts with, like, Mr. 50 Shades at that pub again, you know, where Emily Blunt was singing, and he's singing now, and then he brings her up on stage to sing along with him. And then I don't know if this is it's supposed to be like a this is years later or like an epilogue kind of thing, because it felt like at the end of Titanic when Rose dies and she goes into the ship and everyone's there, because while they're singing, John Hamm is there with the lady, the mom and dad are there. You know, they're alive. So I'm like, I don't know if, like, they all died, if that's what they're talking about. Because it's like it literally just like, I want to marry, blah, blah, blah. I walk up the hill, John Hamm goes with lady, and then all of a sudden, like, they're at the bar singing. Come on, Emily Blunt, come to the bar, or like, come up on stage and sing with me. Okay, we're singing. And then it's like, you look out in the audience, and you see John Hamm with lady, you see Christopher Walken's and mother, and it's like, wait, I thought you guys died. and they're just like singing this song about, and then the song had like the lyrics "Wild Mountain Thyme" in it, and then it ends, and then it ends.
What was the point?
I know, I really do not understand this. I don't even know if you could call it a movie. This thing that I experienced, you know, because it's like it's so stupid because it's just like it starts off fine. It starts off kind of fine because it's like, okay, there are two people who live next door to each other their whole lives, and the whole thing of like we knew each other since we were little and now we fell in love. Fine, we've seen that story 1,000 times. We can do that. But then like we also seen the story of I'm old and I'm gonna croak soon, so which one of my children earns a thing, like that kind of shit. But instead, it goes to none of the children. It goes to the nephew, and he also happens to be American. We've seen that shit. We've seen it. But then, but then we have all that mushed together, plus like strong anti-smoking, like talk. Which again, I'm not a fan of smoking either. But calm your tits, you know. And then the thing where he just drops the whole like I've always felt like I was a bumblebee, a honeybee or whatever the fuck, and it's like since when, And again, like most
That's what he told the lady who slept with priests, right?
was that
Isn't that what he told the lady who slept with priests? Because
that's
he
what
had a tinniness?
right that's the tininess in his brain is that he thinks he's a bunny bee. Jesus Christ! I mean that makes more sense now. He's a bunny bee.
Wait, who was she again? Did she really matter? Did she just show
No,
up for a
she was
second
just yeah. It was one of those like you're here for convenience, like for whatever. I don't even know it's plot convenience. You were just there.
Well, she found out someone had a tininess in their brain, and she got the fuck out of Dodge.
Yeah, same.
So, really, nothing happened.
Yeah, nothing happened. Yeah. Which is why that article titled it, Are the Straights Okay? Because this makes no fucking sense.
So, was it a love movie?
Yeah, it's a romance movie. Apparently, this was also based on a play. I can't imagine. What?
A play. No, I'm just saying those words at you. A play.
Okay. Yeah, it's a play that was on Broadway. Like, deadass on Broadway for like 3 months.
3 months.
3 months. It was one of those, like, small engagement ones, and it was like Deborah Messing's, like, Broadway debut, I can't imagine how that was. Like, how would that be in a play where it's like, could you imagine you paid the minimum of $85 for some seats from some Broadway shit, and suddenly you're watching this thing that, Deborah Messing's da da da, oh my god, Uncle Vanya, blah blah, and some motherfucker comes out of nowhere and says, I believe that I'm a honeybee. I would just be like, how do I get my money back for this shit, I should be paid a lot of money for sitting through this movie. And you and Taylor both need residuals for having to listen about this movie.
I will happily take whatever money you get. And you can hear the faint buzzing of a bee in every scene in which he's faced with a significant choice or obstacle.
Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Get the fuck out of here. I didn't hear jack shit.
This paragraph is not even fucking done. So do you think that maybe they died in that car crash since she's supposed to be a swan and the swan dies?
Oh, like they died in the car crash and them walking up that hill while the storm is clearing up is like them ascending to heaven, and then them singing at the pub is like them, like I said, the Titanic thing where Rose gets there and everyone's back. Yeah. That's so horribly done though, because again, something like Titanic, you knew that's like, okay, she's dead and everyone's back and there's Jack's there and all that stuff, but that just didn't make any sense because it's just like John Hamm was like, I guess I'm in Ireland for a bit of time or whatever shit, and then singing happens. Like, money was spent to get this made, then money was spent to view this movie.